Okay, we're at Marjorie Hammack Owens' home in Spicewood, Texas. The date is January the 25th, 1999, and the purpose of the interview is to gather and preserve historical evidence about life, events, politics, neighborhoods, surrounding communities, and historic preservation in the Dripping Springs area through the perceptions and reminiscence of the people who have witnessed the events that took place in the community. Okay, Marjorie, tell me a little bit about your background, parents and brothers and sisters, and where you lived in early childhood.
My parents were Charles Ross and Marjorie Hammack. I have one brother, Charles Joseph, and had one sister, Mittie Ruth. My brother Charles married Gladys Lorraine Mann September the 4th, 1949. They had 3 children, Charles Randall, Cynthia Lorraine, and Kelly Joseph. My sister, Mittie Ruth, married William Edward Simpson Jr. on November the 24th, 1949. They had 4 children, David William, Edward Charles, James Michael, and Franklin Matthew. I was born at Van Horn, Texas, August 11th, 1921. Lived near Orange, New Mexico, and then later moved to the Pound Place.
Why did you move to the Pound Place?
After my father passed away. And the Pound Place was owned by my grandmother, Georgia Cabot, and great-aunt, Mittie Town Sorrel, daughters of Dr. and Mrs. Josephine Canon.
What kind of work did your father do out in West Texas where you were living?
My father was a rancher and a farmer, and he was born in Arlington, Texas, and moved to West Texas, east of El Paso, where my grandfather had bought 13 sections of land in 1906. When my father was 13 years old, he farmed also. He raised watermelons, maize, corn, and beans, sugar cane, on about 100 acres of land from 2 or 3 rains from the overflow from the Guadalupe Mountains. When he and my mother got married on June the 9th, 1920, they purchased some land near Orange, New Mexico, and had cattle. After 2 or 3 years of drought, he took about 150 cattle to Mexico and sold them and lost the ranch. We then moved to Hash, New Mexico, where he bought 40 acres of irrigated land from water from Elderton Butte Dam, and it was irrigated from ditches from that.
I see. Okay.
He raised corn, maize, alfalfa, and had an apple and a pear orchard, and also a garden. When they would lower the water at the dam, my daddy would go up there and fish. Then we lived there for several years, and in 1930 we moved 90 miles east of El Paso on the El Paso Crossbed Highway on some land owned by my grandmother Hammack, where he had a service station and a cafe until my daddy passed away in May 1934.
And what caused his death?
He had pneumonia, double pneumonia, and bad kidney trouble.
I see.
And they later said that it was probably dust pneumonia. They called it dust pneumonia later.
Okay.
And he was also working on the highway to make a little extra money at the time, just before he passed away. We lived there for about a year, after he passed away, and then we moved to the town place in June 1935. When my mother had gone to the New Mexico State Normal School, and I have a letter from the president of the normal school, Mr. E.L. Enlow, dated June 26, 1917, certifying that Miss Marjorie Cabot graduated with a first grade certificate to teach elementary school. And also have a letter in April 1918 certifying a successful year of teaching at Orange, New Mexico. And she taught 2 more years after that before she married my daddy.
And how did she get out to that? How in the world did she get from Central Texas to West Texas to even meet your dad?
Well, first she went to school there, and then...
Well, I mean, how did she get out there to go to school? Was your grandmother out there already?
My grandmother was out there.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Okay.
And so my grandmother was teaching in that area.
And your grandmother is Georgie Pound Cabot. Yeah.
And my mother wanted to teach school with my grandmother when she first started teaching.
Mm-hmm.
So that Orange, New Mexico was the first, the only place that they found that they both could teach school at the same time.
Okay.
Together. And then she met my father. She went to some dances that my grandmother Hammack gave, she and her family, and they would dance on Saturday nights all night, and they also had all kinds of sandwiches and pies and cakes and things to eat. And then she would, she did not date him for a while, but she went to, one time he went to school up there to see her, and some of the other girls that were in school went out and talked with him, and later he said, well, why didn't you come out and talk to me? And she said she was a little bit shy, and so he said, well, you were the one that I wanted to see.
Oh.
So they started dating then, and they were engaged for about a year before they got married.
Uh-huh.
And he came to Dripping Springs in June, and they were married June the 9th, 1920. And Mr. Lee Berkeley went to Austin to pick up my father.
Mm-hmm.
And they only stayed there a few days after their wedding in the First Baptist Church in Dripping Springs. And then they went back to Orange, New Mexico, and that's where my father had bought a ranch, and he had some cattle. And then after they got married, well, Mother did not teach anymore after that. She helped Daddy on the ranch, and she would ride the horses and help him with the cows and everything. And then until just a little while before I was born. And we lived there for several years, and then he sold about 150 cows, took them to Old Mexico, and then he lost the ranch because it had been real dry weather and for several years. And we then moved to Hatch, New Mexico, where he bought 40 acres of irrigated land.
And that's where all you kiddos got to help work it, huh?
Yes.
Yeah.
And he raised corn, maize, alfalfa, and had an apple and a pear orchard and a garden. we also had some cows and some chickens, and they sold eggs, and they also sold milk there when we lived there.
Okay.
And Charles was born in Alamogordo, New Mexico, and before we, while we were still living at Orange.
Mm-hmm.
And then when we moved to Hatch, Midge Ruth was born at Hatch. And then after, in December 1930, where we moved to 90 miles east of El Paso, on the El Paso Carlsbad Highway, on some land owned by my grandmother Hammack, and he leased the land from her and had a service station and cafe until my daddy passed away in May 1934. He also was working on the highway for a little while.
So how long then did your father passed away, how long was it after he passed away before your mother returned to Central Texas and Dripping Springs with the children? How long was
it?
It
was just a little over a year.
Okay. And during that time she had she continued running a restaurant and service station?
Yes, until we moved back to town place. And I started to school at Hatch, New Mexico. Mm-hmm. And then when we moved to east of El Paso, close to Abel's, which was my grandmother's, where they had the post office, my grandmother Hammack. And my grandmother Kathy taught the three of us for several years.
Is that right? You
Yes.
went to your grandmother.
Yes.
That's neat.
And then...
did she ever spank you?
Oh, yes. She was so strict with us.
Was she more so?
More so than she was with other children.
Oh, for goodness sake. Okay.
And then there was a school, a little one-room schoolhouse built pretty close to where we lived, so the children in the community all went to school there while we were there.
And grandmother didn't teach there?
Grandmother didn't teach there.
Were you glad?
Yes. And when we moved to Dripping Springs, I attended high school there. And Charles and I both did, and Midge Ruth was in grade school.
And you had favorite teachers? Do you remember your teachers?
Yes, I had one favorite teacher when I lived in West Texas, and her name was Vivian McAdoo. And she was a very good teacher, and she was also pretty strict, but that was all right. We didn't mind that.
Yeah. Wasn't like grandmother.
No. And then at Dripping Springs, well, I had Bradley Davis' brother, Albert Davis, and his nickname was Boyd Davis, and Ralph Shelton, and Mrs. Richardson was the teacher, and she was the math teacher, and I liked math very much. That was my favorite subject, algebra and geometry. And if we couldn't understand this problem one way, the way she explained it, well, she would explain it another way.
Oh, that's great. That's great.
And then...
And she was your favorite teacher?
She was my favorite teacher, yes.
Was there problems in the classrooms then? Were kids pretty well behaved?
Oh, they were very well behaved then. Because if the teacher went outside of the room, sometimes the boys would start throwing things at each other and all, but then of course they stopped as soon as the teacher came back in.
Were they still spanking in high school?
No, at least they didn't spank us. I don't remember if anybody gave me a spanking.
What was the
in
worst
high school.
prank anybody pulled that you can remember?
Well, in school they'd throw erasers or they'd throw spit wads to each other and things when the teacher was out of the
That's
out
the
of
worst
room.
you can remember? That's not very bad.
No, they didn't really.
What about Halloween? Did they pull
yes,
things?
They pulled some things in the Halloween.
Can you remember some of the things they pulled Halloween that were a little unusual?
Well, they did some things to the outside toilets.
Like what?
Well, I can't remember. It seemed like one time they might have turned them over because they were, outside. They weren't inside the building. And then I think the door was taken off and things like that done. That was before they started having trick or treat. I think that was one reason when they started having trick or treat was after children started doing things like that.
Decided they'd rather treat them than have tricks, huh?
Yes.
Do you remember some of the guys and what some of the things they got into? Who were some of the guys and what classmates, for instance? Who were some of your classmates?
Well, Francis Berkeley was when I first started, and Willie Edna Prier, and Juanita Snyder, W.A. Breed, J.W.T. Goslin, Nikki Myers, Robin Stevenson.
Young Robin.
Young Robin.
Robin
yes,
Jr.
Yes.
Okay.
And that was all. And with it graduated, I did have Mary Hedges. I was in class with her for a while. And
you have any idea where all these people are now? Are they other than those who have passed away? We know where they are.
Yes.
You know where some of the others are now?
No. Well, Willie Edna.
That's Wheezy, isn't it?
Wheezy.
Yeah.
Married Duck Ragland.
Right. Yeah.
And she lives in Dripping Springs, and W.A. Breed lives in Dripping Springs.
You're right.
I believe Robin Stevenson lives in Austin.
Those are the ones I remember. So, you went all the way through school there?
Yes.
Okay.
And we did have Dimple Spiller with us because she took an extra year of school. So she graduated the year before, but she came back and took an extra year in school. So we had her in the class with us.
I see. Yeah. Okay. And she now lives in Wimberley.
Yes.
Married A.B. Carter.
A.B. Carter. He passed away 2 years ago.
Okay. When you were going to school, and your parents or your mother and your grandmother were living there in the Pound House, and your grandmother taught school too in Dripping Springs, didn't she?
Yes, but not when we were going to school there.
Was that earlier or later?
Well, she taught there earlier. She started teaching when she was 16 years old.
Is that right?
And I believe that she did start in Dripping Springs.
I see. Okay.
But she taught from then on, and she would go to the university during the summer and, get more, take more subjects and got her first grade certificate.
Well, who were some of the merchants in town? Do you remember? Any of the merchants?
Yes. I had. There was Will Crow's store, and Brumley's store, and Mr. Will Garnett had the machine shop.
Blacksmith shop?
Blacksmith shop.
Yeah.
Yes. And Bill Garnett had a garage, and Goslin had the drugstore, and then Alva Hayden had a garage a little bit later.
I see.
And of course, the postmaster, I think, was Mr. McClendon at the time that we first moved back to.
Was that Sant McClendon?
Sant McClendon moved back to Christmas Springs. I believe he was the postmaster at that time.
Do you remember where the post office was located?
It was just west of the Brumley store, in a little wooden building.
Okay. It wasn't in the old hotel?
Oh, yes, it was in the old hotel. I'm sorry.
Okay. Yeah. Right on the first floor
right
as you
on
walked
the first
in?
floor, yes.
Okay. That's what I'd heard.
Yes.
I'm glad that you remember it being
Yes,
there.
it was. No, I had forgotten that it was a hotel. I remember it was a wooden building.
Well, did people deliver to your home then if you needed
Yes,
it?
they did. The Brumleys used to take some groceries up to my mother and grandmother, and then she would have Bill Garnett used to come up and help her with her car if she had trouble with it.
Well, what about if your well quit working?
And then, if the well quit working, which we had to have pumped during the summer when it was real
Gasoline
still
pump?
a gasoline pump, and so Alva Hayden would come up and start the pump for my mother, and then he also would come up and help her with her automobile later on when she needed some help with it. And her personal people that personally came to help her were Alan Stevenson and Mr. Lee Berkeley, and they would come up and help Charles when he needed some help, or when mother and grandmother were there by themselves and they needed some help.
Sure.
And then also Reverend O.V. Stubbs and his two sons used to come up, and the boys used to help Charles do things around the house, and I used to go down and help Miss Lonnie Stubbs with some things at her house.
Well, how nice.
And then Theda, the youngest girl, was born there.
At the Pounds
right there, right close to where we lived at the end of the lane from where we lived.
What is the story of the Stubbs family and the windmill tower in the back?
Oh, well, Reverend Stubbs and his sons did build that last windmill tower.
That's
there. And
do you know what year that might have been?
No, it was in the late 30s, though.
Okay. So
because I was still at home, and I left home in 1939 after I graduated from high school.
Okay.
So, and they also put up the ceiling in the living room.
Oh, they did?
Yes.
I didn't know that. Yes, that's interesting. Oh, then you left home in what, 39?
In 1939.
And where did you go?
I went to Austin to business school, Nixon Clay Business College, and then when I got through there, I didn't actually get a certificate, but I started working before I actually got through. I got my certificate. And then I'd go back every once in a while and review some at Nixon.
So you never really moved back to Dripping Springs?
So I never moved back to Dripping Springs.
Well, tell me some stories about your grandmother and some of the stories that she told you and Charles and Ruth as you were growing up, and tell me some stories about her and stories she might have told you about her father, Dr. Pounds.
Well, she was very fond of her mother and father both. They were really great parents, and she said that she always, when she was teaching school sometimes, well, he liked to give big dinners and all, and she would go and teach school, and then she'd go home and cook, and they'd have some big dinners for people, Dr. Pound's friends and all.
He was very sociable
yes,
then.
He was. Yes, he really loved people as well as he loved his profession as a doctor. And and of course, in the earlier years, well, my grandmother, who of course helped my grandmother Georgia Cabot, but then later she broke her hip, and after that she didn't do very much in the kitchen after that, but she did do a lot of other things. You know, she pieced quilts and sewed and.
Was she an avid reader?
She was an avid reader. Yes.
Did she help get your? Did she stimulate you toward reading?
My grandmother?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, yes, she did. Yes, she really read a lot, and she used to read a lot to us, and had us read to her, and it was real. You know, it was real interesting.
What story in your mind stands out that your grandmother Georgie told you about her mother and father?
Well, they moved to Drifting Springs from Mississippi. He had gone to school in Louisville, Kentucky. He first went there before the Mexican War, and then when he enlisted in the Mexican War, and he fought in the Battle of Buena Vista, and after that they had had so many killed that the ravines ran in blood.
Oh my.
And so he said that he wanted to go back and finish his doctorate degree so he could help people instead of destroying people.
Well, that's very admirable. And how old was he at that time? Do you have an idea?
He was a pretty young man. I don't remember exactly how old he was. But then he went back and finished his degree at Louisville, and got his doctorate degree at Louisville, and then he moved to Mississippi, and he met my great-grandmother, Sarah Dunbibbin Ward Pound, there, and they got married, and then in 1853 they moved to Drifting Springs area.
Okay. There's a little bit of controversy about 1853 and 1854.
Yes.
Where didn't they move? They were in the area, but
they moved up to Henley at first.
Okay.
And then Dr. Pound didn't exactly like that area as well as he did at Drifting Springs, so then they bought the place at Drifting Springs and moved there.
Okay.
And they first had 750 acres.
Mm-hmm.
And when his oldest daughter got married, well, he gave her 135 acres.
And who was that now?
And that was Nan Stevenson.
Oh, okay.
She married Ben Stevenson. Okay. And then they sold then 200 acres to the east of them after that, and that left them about 400 acres left. 470 acres.
I see. Well, now, is it true that two other families came with them?
Two other families came with them.
At the same time?
The Moss family and Mrs. Moss and Mrs. Pound are sisters.
I see.
And the Wallace family, John Wallace, family came with them, or about the same time, and Wallace Mountain Cemetery was named for the Wallace family that had first moved there.
I see. Do you know the story of how that cemetery got started?
No, I don't.
Okay. I just thought maybe you did. Well, what prompted your mother to decide that she wanted the city to have the Pound farmstead?
Well, she thought that it would, since it was one of the first buildings in the vicinity, in the neighborhood, well, she felt like that it would be nice for it to be made into a museum.
Uh-huh.
So in August the 16th, she signed a contract with the city of Dripping Springs to give it to them, and then she passed away on the 26th of August. And then the city did not accept did not sign the papers and accept the gift of the Pound House until February 1987.
What was the holdup? Do you remember?
I don't remember. They just kept delaying it, and then after they signed the papers, and after we gave it to them, well, they did not do anything with it for 5 years, and it was in the contract if they didn't do anything with it in 5 years that we could have it back. And we took it back then, the family did, my brother, my sister, and myself, and we gave it to the Friends of the Pound House.
I see.
Because the city was not doing anything with it, and I was very disappointed that the city did not do anything with it. But I'm very pleased with the progress since the Friends of the Pound House and Katherine and you and Dr. Canon, and as well as the other members of the...
Do you sometime wish that you had kept it?
No, I don't. Of course, it's like home, of course, to me. But we did not have the money or the time. Any of the family had money or time to spend to restore it.
Uh-huh.
And so I'm very pleased that it is being restored.
Well, we're pleased that we're being able to do it. When you think about your great-grandfather, Dr. Pounds, what memories or how do you feel? Do you feel pride or?
I feel very proud that he was my great-grandfather, because he used to do a lot of things in the community as well as being a doctor.
Mm-hmm.
Because he helped. Well, they first had the Methodist circuit rider come there once in a while. I believe it was like once a month, and had church services at Dr. Pound's house. And then he had he helped with the establishing the Confederate reunion, Camp Ben McCullough, and also when they had school there at the Pound place for a while, and then they built the Baptist cabinet.
Okay.
And then they started having school there after it was built.
Well, he seems like a very energetic and thoughtful person,
He really was.
and I would think
He
that
was very
his
well.
wife was the same way.
Yes, she was. She was more quiet than he was, but she was very loving to her children and her grandchildren, and also she enjoyed having company as well as he did.
Did she ever pull anything funny that was passed down to the rest of the family?
Well, I don't remember of hearing my grandmother or mother either one say anything especially about her, but they did say she was, she was a very loving person, and they really did care a lot about her.
Yeah.
All the grandchildren, and mother's brother, Bud Stevenson, Bud Pound, and Charles Ward Pound. Well, he never did get married, but Dr. Pound had some land at Del Rio, and he gave him that land.
Oh.
At Del Rio, and but he was there at the Pound house a whole lot, and he kind of spoiled my mother and Sarah Edith, which is Sarah Edith Oldham, when her mother was Livonia Pound Oldham, and she was the youngest daughter of the Pounds, and so Sarah Edith was there a whole lot visiting, and also Birdie Walters, and she was Mittie Lou Brackenridge Walters. She was also there a lot, and her mother was Elizabeth Pound Walters. And then after he died, Mr. Walters died, well, she married Mr. Hunt. And
Are those the Hunts at Wimberley?
No,
Don't think so.
I don't think so. I think they were probably related, but his son was DeWitt Hunt, and he had a PhD that he got from San Marcos, and he taught for many years in Oklahoma.
I see.
And he was just like a cousin to my mother and Sarah Edith, and he lived to be in his 90s, I believe 95, 96, and he would come back here and visit usually in the summertime, and he would take them out to lunch and around, and he and his wife, and he was married 2 times, and his first wife died with cancer, and then later his second wife died with cancer. And then he moved to Marble Falls in his last few years because he had a nephew that lived not very far from Marble Falls.
Awesome.
And
when you were growing up, did you, around Dripping Springs, of course you and Charles were a little older by the time you got here, but did you have certain chores that you had to do?
oh yes, we always had to help with things around the house, and I usually help Mother in the kitchen and help clean house, and then I would help bring in wood and start the fire, and Charles and Miss Ruth usually did the milking and tending to the feed and feeding the chickens and cows and things out.
Did y'all ever have brother and sister arguments or fights?
Yes, we all. I suppose all children did. Mother said that she knew what she missed, but just being an only child because of all the arguments and good times also that we had.
Oh, who usually won the arguments?
Well, I don't know, but sometimes Miss Ruth and Charles team up against me. I suppose because I was the oldest.
Oh, heck. What kind of fun did you have? What were your your fun times?
Well, we had a lot of fun.
Doing what?
We played played baseball, and we played. We'd pitch horseshoes and washers, and then of course we played hide and seek and all those kind of games like that like we did a lot of times like we did.
Did you ever play tricks on each other?
Oh yes.
What kind of tricks did you play?
Well, we would tell them something. One of us would tell them that somebody wanted to see them, or that they needed to go do something that Mother said for them to do, and then finally they'd find out that that it wasn't true.
Somebody filmed.
That's right. So then they got into trouble.
Well, it must have been worth it because you're laughing.
Yes.
What happened if you skipped out on your chores?
Oh, well, Mother used to give me a switching with a little old broom weed. Oh, that hurt so bad. That was worse than being spanked with a board.
Did they have plays at school back in those days?
Yes, they did have.
And did you participate in that?
Well, no, I didn't.
Yeah.
But I did participate in a spelling contest, when we had, I think, quarterly meets or something.
County meet kind of things.
Yes.
Well, did you play sports?
No,
You didn't?
I didn't. Mother Ruth did, and then of course Charles did when he went to Buda. He played football.
Who were some of the big sport heroes back in those days? Do you remember any?
Well,
did you have football? Had football started?
Well, football started. I believe it was just the year that I graduated.
And that would be what, 39?
Yes.
38, 39, somewhere in there.
And that was Ms. Myers was one of them, and I believe J.W.T. Goslin was also one. And
what was his nickname?
Snoops.
Snoops Goslin. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So those two were football players, and
I can't remember now. Anyhow, it was 6 man.
Okay.
When we first started having.
Did you go to any of the games?
Oh yes, went to nearly all, at least all the home games.
Yeah. Did you enjoy it?
I certainly did.
You remember who the coach was?
Mr. Robbins, I believe.
Oh, okay. Then he started it.
Yes, Mr. Robbins did. He was a football fan himself.
I see.
And he was also the principal that year, and he was also a principal of Austin High School when my 2 oldest children graduated
Is that
from high
right?
school. Yes.
He's one of my favorite people.
Yes, I really did like him.
Yes, definitely.
And when he got to be older, when my children grew up, well, he still looked the same that he did when I went to school with him.
That's amazing.
And Mid Ruth had his wife for a teacher when she was in Rippon Springs.
So when you left home and you went into Austin and you had a business education at Nixon Clay, where did you first go to work?
I first went to work, while I was still in school, I went to work part-time at the Red Cross office.
Mm-hmm.
Just, a little bit in the afternoon, like after I went to school.
Mm-hmm.
And then I went to work for Metcalf Engineering Company, which is a surveying company, mostly. They did some other engineering also. But I worked there for 25 years.
My goodness.
And that's where I met my husband.
Is
Clifton.
that right? Ah.
Yes, he went to work there, and he was just like any other person that went to work there. I didn't pay much mind to him at first.
Yeah.
But I knew his sister, one of his sisters, from next to the youngest one, Doris, and she kind of encouraged me to go to date him. So she was married at the time, And so she and her husband and Clifton and I used to go places a lot together.
Wow, how long did it take before he won you over?
Well, we met about January of 1955, and we got married June the 24th.
Didn't take long.
No.
My, he must have been a real Casanova.
Yes.
And you have 3 wonderful children. I've met them all. Would you tell me something about them, their names?
Well, Wanda Jean is the oldest, and she was born April the 3rd, 1956, and she is now married and to Dick Malden, and they got married June the 13th, 1987, and then I have, and she has a little boy who was born April. Charles Ross Thomas Malden was born March the 3rd, 1991, and then Clifton Ross was my second son. He was born August the 27th, 1957 in Austin, Texas, and he's not married. And Wilma Ruth, my youngest one, was born November the 1st, 1961 in Austin, and she married Christopher Eric Long June the 16th, 1984, and Christopher was born October the 5th, 1963, and they have 3 children. Zebulon Stephen Long, born February the 6th, 1987, Caleb Jonathan, born April the 10th, 1991, Josiah Thaddeus, born October the 9th, 1995.
Ms. Owens, what was your husband Clifton Owens doing just as he retired?
He was surveying land.
Oh, was he
Yes.
still with Metcalf?
No, he was working for Billy Priest there
see.
at the time that he retired.
I see. Well, and you're here now in Spicewood, and why did you choose Spicewood?
Well, we had a friend that we had worked with that lived in Spicewood, at my Spicewood Beach, and he told us that there were some vacant lots up here if we wanted to buy some lots. So we bought lots in 1974 up here, but we did not do anything with it. You know, we'd just come up once in a while. And then when my youngest daughter, Wilma, graduated from high school in Austin, well, we moved up to Spicewood at that time.
I see.
And got a mobile home, and we've been here ever since.
Are you happy here?
Yes, I like it here.
Well, that's great. I've often wondered why you didn't move back to Dripping Springs.
Well, we thought about it several
you really?
times. Yes, we did.
You just went ahead then and
Yes,
made this
we
choice,
just went ahead
and you've
made
been
it.
happy about it?
Yes.
Yeah. When your mother became ill, what year was that? When she got to the point where she could no longer really live by herself?
Well, in 1983, she was still living by herself most of the time. But you know,
Well,
a
now
few
was
times,
that at the pound or in the
yes,
pound home?
In the pound home.
1983.
Yes, in 1983.
By herself.
By herself.
That's amazing.
And but you know, any time that she got very ill and felt bad, well, she came and stayed with us for a while until she got to feeling better.
Uh-huh.
And she did that even just a week before she passed away. We went and got her from
that right?
the pound house.
What caused her
And,
death?
Heart attack.
A heart attack. My goodness.
She
was such an energetic lady.
She'd had heart problems for several years.
I wasn't aware of that.
Yes, she was. She did have.
Well, she was such an energetic person.
She was very energetic
And
very independent.
Oh, yes. I was surprised when I first heard that she was not over there, that she was having to go to your home. I was surprised that she would leave her place.
Well,
she just loved it so much.
She really didn't want to, Of course, we were glad to have her any time that she would come and stay with us.
I remember going over there as a child, and either your grandmother, Miss Georgie, or your mother would play the piano or the pump organ, and I just loved it. Do any of you children play?
No.
Was there a reason why nobody had the patience to teach you?
I guess that was probably it. But Mother was really a good pianist.
I know.
And she would just go for a long time and not play. And then, she would just come back and just pick it up and just go on with it.
Did she play by note and by ear, or both?
By note, I think. I don't believe she ever played.
Well, did Miss Georgie read notes and play
too? But Miss Georgie did. My grandmother,
yeah,
Miss Georgie did. She did. She did not play very much that I can remember, because Mother nearly always played.
She liked to sing, though. I remember Miss Georgie singing.
She loved to sing.
Those were happy memories for me. Well, in your growing up there, do you have memories of the community that stands out? Any particular thing or any particular person or family that you felt close to, that you remember as you have grown older and think about?
Well, I was always very close to your family.
Yeah.
And also to the Stubbs family.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was close to Willie Edna, Willie Edna Freer. And then, of course, Aletha Cobb, my mother's first cousin, and Mrs. Short Mama
Miss Hayden.
Yeah.
Malott.
And Dolores Kahn's mother, Vara Hester, and she was Charles' Sunday school teacher.
Was she?
Yes. And he always thought a lot of her.
She was a wonderful lady.
Yes, she really was. And of course, Robin Stevenson and Louise, Robin's was Mother's second cousin. Mm-hmm. And we went to see them a lot. And of course, Aunt Maggie and Uncle Frank, his mother and daddy.
Yeah.
And, it was just, I just really did have a very good...
You felt comfortable.
Good time when I lived there.
Did you ever know Mr. Pugh Glosson? Solon Glosson's brother, yes. Mr. Pugh?
Yes. Mother really did think a lot of him.
He was quite a character.
Yes.
Were there any... I hate to keep pushing on you, but...
No, that's all right.
Usually when you hear something, it triggers your mind, and you suddenly remember somebody, and I was wondering, did we have a town drunk back in those days? And did we have a town rowdy back in those days?
Well, I don't really remember much about anybody being very rowdy or anything. But I know there were a few that drank quite a bit.
Yeah. I'm not asking you to name names, but
yes,
I just wondered if we had those in our community at that time, because I was pretty small.
Oh, yes, and then, of course, Mr. Will Garnett and Miss Emma, mm-hmm. We thought a lot of them. And then in church, I always remember Harvey King singing in
he
church.
had such a voice.
Yes, he did. And then Hazel Bell was the pianist for quite some time there when she was in high school.
Oh, really? That early?
at church, yes.
Well, I really do appreciate you taking the time to visit with me and put your thoughts and ideas and memories on tape, and it will be cherished.
Well, you know, my mother and father were both really great people. And Mother was very, very unselfish. You know, she always thought of other people.
That's right.
And when we were growing up, you know, in West Texas, well, we didn't have anybody very close to us. My cousin Isabel, my Uncle Ed's daughter, well, she used to come to see us quite a bit and spend the night, and then I'd go spend the night with her. But a lot of times it was just the three of us there, you know, and Mother always made a big deal of their birthdays and Christmas and everything, you know, and that was really wonderful.
Yeah. They were wonderful ladies, the whole family.
Yes.
I remember. Well, is there anything else you'd like to say before we end our interview?
Well, my grandmother, of course, was also, you know, I always felt so very close to her, and she always did a lot for us. Even, you know, she used to help my mother and daddy out financially when they needed help, as well as as when she would come to help, you know, herself. And she used to come visit us when she was teaching school. She'd come to visit us sometimes in the summertime, and then at Christmas time. But some of the summer, you know, part of the summer, she would come to the pound house, and she and Aunt Mitty.
Well, tell me also, I just happened to think, your grandmother was one of the early political-minded women.
Oh, yes. She really was.
Tell me something about that.
She was very interested in politics, and I think she got that from her father, because
really?
he was very interested in politics, and he was said that he thought it was terrible for the federal government to have so much authority. He
would really be upset now, wouldn't he?
He now? He thought it was bad then, but he really believed in states' rights, you know, and not the federal government not to have so much authority.
Well, who was your grandmother George's favorite politician that would come by and visit with her?
Oh, well, she did have one. Oh, yes. Lyndon B. Johnson was one when he was majority leader in the
House.
The House,
yeah.
Yes. And then, of course, she got letters from him that she would write to him, you know, and then she'd gotten letters from him.
Well, did he actually come to the pound house?
He came to the pound house, yes.
More than once?
Yes, he did.
Did he ever spend the night there? I've heard he had.
I think he did when he was younger, probably before he was elected representative.
I'd heard that he'd spend the night there on his way to Austin.
Yes, because
that is true.
It was kind of halfway between Johnson City and Austin.
So that is true.
So that is true.
I see. Well, that's interesting.
Then I had a letter that my grandmother got from one of the governor's wives. But she was close to him, and then they visited back and forth, and also she, you know, the local people that she used to have some of the local people visit her.
Mm-hmm. Local politicians?
Oh, local politicians,
yeah.
Yes. They used to come to visit her.
How did she feel about women voting?
Oh, she was for it.
I would think so.
Yes.
Did she get out and campaign for it?
Oh, yes.
'Cause I know my mother
I'm sure
did.
she did, yes.
Well, she was a lady ahead of her time.
Yes.
And I think your mom was too.
Yes.
Two very well educated women. And they were leaders too in their community.
Yes.
They definitely were leaders. Well, Marjorie, thank you so much. I really do appreciate this, and this will be going in the library for future references for people who are trying to understand our community, and we thank you so much.
Well, I appreciate you doing this, Catherine, and I really have enjoyed you being here.
Well, thank you very much. Marjorie, you just said a while ago you should have mentioned something about an inauguration, so let's hear it.
Well, in 1939, when I was a senior in high school, well, the high school from Dripping Springs came to the Memorial Stadium to watch W. Leo Daniels be inaugurated.
I think that's worth tacking on. So here you are.